Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us tonight here at the Leak Project. We have special guest, Dr. Brooks Agnew. Dr. Agnew is a researcher, lecturer, inventor, scientist, author, adventurist, and math guru, graduating in the top 0.1% of his class at Tennessee Technological University in chemistry and mathematics. Dr. Agnew has a PhD in physics and is contracted for hundreds of Fortune 100 companies. His projects and more than 1,000 technical publications earned him U.S. patents and the rank of Six Sigma Black Belt, with more than 500 million recovered or earned from his process improvements. Also, Dr. Agnew first became an author back when he was only 13 and has created a 3-part series called The Arc of Millions that has remained in the top 1% at Amazon as well as Barnes & Noble. Radio host of X Squared, Dr. Agnew speaks with guests each week live between 5 and 8 p.m. Pacific time. Hey, Dr. Agnew, this is just great to have you on the show tonight. Is it okay if I call you Brooks?
Oh, that's even better. I like that.
Perfect. So how the heck you doing?
Well, you ever see a one-legged cat in a litter box?
Not yet.
Yeah, it's pretty busy and just trying to keep it covered up and keep everything going. It's an exciting time to be alive on the earth.
Oh, it certainly is. I mean, technology, every single day, something new is coming out. It's like Christmas every other day for, tech gurus. It's amazing. Nanotechnologies and biotechnologies and just rewriting of history and everything else that's going on. But, I know back in 2006, you were basically the lead guy for an expedition into the inner Earth. And how did that go? I don't know if I've had an opportunity to hear much about that.
Well, we, of course, traveled the world, went to Tibet and China and Japan and Mexico and Canada. And let's see, where else did we go? We went to the UK, all over the UK, chasing this legend about the possibility of, Earth being formed as a hollow sphere. And there was a lot of science coming out all along the way, different studies done on USGS seismograms, observations from space, oceanographic observations, which just seemed to bring into question current planetary core geology, and it just really excited us. And of course, we wanted to do an expedition by sea, by ocean voyage to this region of the Arctic, but there was only about a 2-year window that this was going to be open, because then it was going to refreeze. It was just a really freak opening that occurred in 2007. So we hurried as fast as we could and tried to raise the money. We were not successful in doing that. And so we never did make the Arctic voyage. Now we're talking with LTA, lighter than air cameras, a company that has been feeding high schools and colleges all over the country with their gear to launch balloons, up into actually about 100,000 feet and take pictures and take samples of the air and radiation and, send experiments up. And they're the ones been supplying all the hardware. So I contacted them, and we are putting together a multi-craft expedition without people. We're going to send just the cameras floating over this area. And the challenge is to not do it at 100,000 feet, but do it from about 4,000 feet or 5,000 feet. So we want to be able to put altitude controls on these balloons. And so these guys are the experts at it. They think they can get a balloon to go up just to a certain altitude or barometric pressure, stay there, and then travel with the winds across that area that we were going to sail by ship. And then we'll collect the balloons over on the leeward side of the project, and then download all the information from the cameras and see what we can see. So we're going to try that this summer.
That would make sense as financially also. I'm sure it's a lot more affordable to do that versus
yeah.
And it makes me wonder too, being the past few years have been some of the hottest years on record. I think I read a headline, I didn't read the article, but it said last year was the hottest year on record worldwide. So I need to get into that some more. And I'm wondering if that opening that was available for just a short time back in 2007, if now it's possibly gotten even bigger and it's there right now.
Well, actually, all that data that shows that the planet's hotter than it's ever been is all false data.
Really?
Yeah. Even the NOAA article that's being quoted by Congress by saying, 2014 was the hottest year on record, and they hold up the NOAA study. That's actually a misquote of the study. The study headline actually said there's a 38% chance that 2014 was the hottest year on record. It wasn't, obviously. What we look for when you do what's called scatter plotting and you try to make a prediction based on past data, is you look for a line fit. You look to see if your data fits along a regression line that you draw through the data. And what we really look for is data that fits at least 99%, like 99.2 or 99.5. That's pretty good data. We start getting down in the 96, 94, 85. It starts to look more like a cloud with a line drawn through it. It's not really indicative of a trend. But when you get into 38%, this is on the in the realm of the ridiculous. So they reported the information correctly, but it was headlined incorrectly. The truth is, if you look up the Arctic Ice website yourself, you can see it. We're actually back to 1981 levels of ice, what we call red ice. Red ice is ice that lasts through the summer and then is snowed on again by the winter snows. And we're back to 1981 levels. So the ice is now only about 50,000 square miles from where it was originally in the 1700s. And it's just way out on the outer edges of it. So this area that we wanted to sail is now probably 3 meters thick in ice. And it probably won't open up for ever again. It only opened up once in 100,000 years, which was in 2007. And that wasn't really a warm year. What happened was this polar vortex that we're experiencing the last few years in North America was blowing in a different direction in 2007. It was blowing almost diagonally due east across the bottom of the ice shelf. And it created a very powerful and broad wind shear across the ice shelf. And it caused it to calf or calve. It's like having a calf, like a cow has a calf. That's what we call it with glaciers. And it broke off, and it was about half the size of the state of Connecticut. And that's what opened up this Northwest Passage and made it navigable. But since then, it has completely refrozen over, and you can't get close to it even in the summertime, not even with an icebreaker.
Wow. Okay, so that's very interesting, and it wouldn't surprise me, because if the powers that be or if the mainstream media tells you one thing on the news, I usually think it's the exact opposite. That's just kind of how they, well, it's good for you. Well, it's really not. So, but
it can be, but it's almost always that way, especially when there's a lot of money tied up in it.
Sure.
And what the powers that be, or so you call them, they're actually trying to craft a global tax on carbon. So we're talking about trillions of dollars of taxes pulled from developed countries that they can redistribute to developing countries. And this is the basis of this tax, is this myth called man-made climate change. Now, climate change does happen, but mankind has nothing to do with it.
Well, let me jump in here then. As far as the way the weather has been here in Texas this year, last year, and other places in the U.S. at least, I don't know worldwide, but I've had the opportunity to travel the country quite extensively since 2013, and it does seem like at least the sun is a lot more intense. Like even if the temperature is the same, it seems like the heat on your skin, it just feels more intense. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, and I do feel it too. And there are a lot of reasons why that happens. One is, of course, the wavelengths that the sun is putting out, but the other are the wavelengths that make it through our atmosphere and reach the surface. And, one of the things that has been occurring since the president and other organizations around the world have declared war on climate change, when they declare war on something, they like to develop weapons against it, and once they develop the weapon, they got to try it.
Right.
So they've been doing what appears to be spraying, high altitude spraying. You call it chemtrails.
Glad you brought this up.
And the spraying, it does two things. First of all, it blocks the infrared, which is a longer wavelength radiation that can strike the oceans, for instance, and warm them up. And so the theory is that if you block the infrared, you will begin cooling the planet. And this was, a grand experiment that was done without our permission. And they can't deny it. I mean, there's too much proof now that it does happen. But the other thing that happens is the ultraviolet frequencies, the shorter wavelength frequencies, are intensified. And it has a more devastating effect to the biosphere than the infrared does, in that it dimerizes long chain molecules, especially DNA. Dimerization, consider it like a double-bladed axe. It comes in and splits free radicals in molecules and breaks them apart. And when it does, it causes mutation. Now, it doesn't so much affect the larger life forms, but it does affect smaller life forms like bacteria. And as you know, all of the life forms on Earth ultimately live off of bacteria. So when you begin sterilizing the bacteria that protect the surface and that create the prime food chain for plankton, and then of course whales, and all the fish, and then the fish that eat the fish, all that accumulates, those mutations begin to pass through the biology, the physiology of the planet, and it can have devastating effects. And we're seeing it. We're seeing mammals that come to the surface for air and reside in mostly shallow water most of the time, wash ashore with these terrible sunburns that they've never had before, and in large groups. And it is, I believe, is a direct result of this intensifying of the shorter wavelengths of light that are making their way through our atmosphere.
Another thing I'd like to ask you, and I've talked to other people about this before. I have a radiation detector built into my watch that keeps track of basically the UHV ratings, the microsieverts per hour. And I've noticed the past 3 years, they've almost doubled here in San Antonio on a regular basis. And I'm wondering if that might, like the chemtrail spraying, or what do you think is causing that? And I don't think it's Fukushima, because it would have happened sooner, I think.
Well, you probably wouldn't be seeing it in Texas if it was Fukushima, for sure. But the key question here when you're talking about radiation is the species of the radiation. What is it that's causing the radiation? If you're just looking at scintillations, that can be a little bit deceiving. Now, I have a gamma and alpha spectrometer, so I can tell what it is that's making the radiation. So I went to the coast of California last year, and I did a survey from San Francisco all the way up to the Oregon border, on the coast, right on the water. And I was taking samples of the air as close as I could get to the water to see if I was getting cesium or plutonium or thorium or sodium-40 or something, and I was not. So whatever radiation increases that you're seeing are probably not those species. It's probably longer wavelength radiation in the X-ray or in the gamma ray range, but it's not radiation from a decay here on this planet.
Well, that's actually a good thing then, if you're not finding plutonium out by California.
Yeah, because it's about the most poisonous thing on the Earth. Plutonium and polonium are deadly in even small amounts because they're alpha emitters. Once you receive an alpha particle in your body, it's only a matter of time, and not very long, sometimes a matter of hours or days, that particle is going to decay. And when it does, it's an alpha decay, and it's like a sledgehammer on biological tissue.
And another thing too, with all the chemtrails that are going on, do you think that might have something to do with blocking out like satellite pictures from, Russia or something like that?
Sure, it could. Satellites typically can view in several different wavelengths depending on the kind of instruments that are on it. They can look at X-ray or infrared or visible light, and it certainly would block out the visible, and it probably would mask the infrared signatures as well. Infrared signatures are really important, especially with national defense, because you can tell, for instance, if an airplane was sitting on a tarmac the day before and then they moved it, you could see the infrared signature of that plane on the tarmac because of the temperature difference. So the plane doesn't actually have to be there. They can know the satellite's coming over and they can move the plane, but you can still see the shadow of the plane. So it's really important in national defense.
Okay. And if we could jump back to that expedition in 2006 where you had the opportunity to travel different locations on the globe here, did you guys hit hotspots that were popular in conspiracy realms where underground tunnels supposedly are that are connected to military DUMS type bases? Or
we did. We were traveling. We did the upper plateau of Tibet for 2 weeks, and this is really unforgiving territory. We did it. If you do the upper plateau, they call them roads, but they're not roads by our standards. You need a kidney belt, even in a four-wheel drive, to be able to last for 2 weeks in this area because the roads are really, really rough. And as you know, China has controlled Tibet since 1959. We were one of the last group of Western explorers that was able to get into Tibet before they closed it again to Western traffic. And we were traveling across the upper plateau. We were going to Nepal by road. And we got to a certain area where the Chinese had heavily developed this river area. And before we crossed down into this valley, you could see the complex, and it was something to behold. Our bus driver stopped, and the translator said, "Now we have to stop before we cross this bridge, and we have to be inspected. Do not take your cell phone out of your pocket. Don't take a camera out of your pocket. They're watching you by camera, and if you take a cell phone out of your pocket on this bridge, we're all going to be arrested." So we could take no pictures of this place. Now, this story gets really strange because here we are on this multi-million-dollar bridge in the middle of this unforgiving territory. It's like a wasteland. This is very high tech. And you could see in the side of where they had excavated this area, large openings where who knows how far it went back in there. But we could see it with our eyes, but we couldn't take a picture of it. Now, here's where it gets really strange. We make it to Nepal. We spend a few days there, and then I fly back to LAX. When I get to LAX, I'm separated out of the line, and I go into what looks like a cattle chute. And this guy dressed in black with bloused boots and a beret hat looks me in the eye and says, I noticed that you spent the last 2 weeks in the Upper Plateau. I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "Did you take any pictures?" I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "Let me see your camera." I took the camera out. He said, "Turn it on." And he went through, I had over 1,000 pictures on this camera. He went through all 1,000 pictures. And then he said, "Do you have another disc for this camera?" I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Load it up." So I took that disc out, put the other disc in the camera, and he went through all those pictures. And then he handed my camera back to me and let me go. They were looking, I believe, for pictures of that bridge.
Well, yeah, I mean, why else would you get checked out like that and ask specifically for pictures and say, wow, can you describe that area to us? I mean, in detail? That's incredible.
Oh, it was, I mean, this is a place where a lot of concrete, we're talking something, maybe a quarter the size of Hoover Dam, but a lot of concrete was poured in this area. And there was nothing, nothing, not a blade of grass for 50 miles in any direction. And they had this complex built back into this mountain. It was really something.
Now, also the Antarctic, I mean, that's one of the more hush-hush places. Google Maps, you can't even get on there really.
True.
A lot of places are blocked out. So do you think that that's where maybe one of the major entry points to the underground?
It's hard to say. We've sent several two-man teams starting in, I want to say 2008. And then we did it again last year. And they never made it. They made it to New Zealand, but could not get a ride from New Zealand to Antarctica. And of course, that place has been militarized for a long, long time. And while we were trying to go there, I think Australia was the governing body of the organization that's down there. It rotates. There's a council of nations that run it. But you have to be either with the military attaché or you have to be affiliated, which means you got to be aligned with a university, and it's got to be on a grant program. And typically, all the grant money for these things comes from DARPA. So you can go there, but you got to be affiliated, and then they're only going to let you see certain amounts. And there's only about a 2-month to 2.5-month period when you can even go there. The rest of the year, it's so cold, like 90 below zero. They just don't have travel there unless it's an emergency.
There's a lot of speculation also that the Nazis or the regime went there after World War II and restarted. And I've heard of giant pyramids there, people that have supposedly seen them. What do you think's out there?
Well, there is some speculation, but there's also some factual information, and that is that toward the end of World War II, it looked like defeat was imminent. There were naval vessels, mostly U-boats, but there were other naval vessels that made many, many trips to the Antarctic, and some of those ships never returned. There are numerous U-boats that are not accounted for, and they were seen leaving these cliffside submarine bases that they had in Norway, and these U-boats were never seen again. Some of them were scuttled off the shore of Brazil, and some of them were scuttled off the shore of New York. But those U-boats have been found. The other U-boats have never been found. So there was reasonable speculation based on fact that personnel, technology, leadership, perhaps infrastructure was moved to Antarctica to try to escape defeat, escape capture, and maybe revive operations in that area. And understand that there was an operation, a sizable operation, although it's very difficult to get factual evidence on it, called Operation High Jump, that was ostensibly led by Admiral Byrd, who was, for all intents and purposes in those days, a well-revered war hero, even though he was on up in years in 1947, that led this expedition down there with numerous ships and battle-hardened troops because they didn't want to fight the Nazis again. And they went down there, and rumor has it that they got their tails handed to them and ended up sailing to Brazil to lick their wounds and then came home. And not much official information, but lots and lots of unofficial and unclassified information that indicates that this operation did take place. Now, what happened during this operation is the subject of wild, unsubstantiated rumors, everything from Nazi hybrid flying saucers firing on the ships and advanced weaponry of all kinds. Some of that is far-reaching science fiction, but obviously something organized was down there, and we don't know if it lasted. But one thing is for sure, there are thousands of people that work in Antarctica now, and every square mile of that ice is sailed, flown, and looked at with satellites. So there's nothing that goes on down there that governments don't know about.
You know, and so why is it that there's such large swaths that are blocked out in Google Maps? Because it's not just small areas. I mean, it's very large percentages.
Well, in 2006, there was a joint set of legislation that was passed with the NOAA and EUMETSAT. These are the two large governing satellite organizations for Europe and for the United States. And that was called the Data Denial Act. And in that act, it specifically said, no real-time data will be available above either of the 60th parallels on the planet. So Google Maps, everything above the 60th parallel going north and below the 60th parallel going south is animated. None of it is real.
You know, like I guess half the stuff you see from NASA.
NASA's an interesting organization. It has a spectrum of leadership. Some of it is very seasoned. Some of it's been there since the 60s. I know that's kind of hard to believe, but I've met individuals that have been working there for 40 years, and they're still working. And then the rest of them are very young because NASA doesn't pay squat. And so what you get are a lot of grad students, which basically work for food. Right. And they're trying to build their resume. They're trying to organize their specialty, get involved with a contractor like Raytheon or Halliburton or one of the big contractors that deals with these really inhospitable areas. And they work on their PhDs, which is very highly specified research in one very small area. And then once they get that PhD, they go get an affiliated job at a university and teach for the rest of their lives. So that's the spectrum of NASA. And it's basically the same way at JPL, although JPL gets most of the contract money. They actually run most of the 57 active space programs that we have.
Okay. Now, back to Antarctica, too, when it's obviously very limited how many people can go out there from the U.S., but what does Russia and China and some of the other big players have vested in Antarctica?
Well, they also belong to this multinational group that manages Antarctica. It's sort of like a continent that has all of the major countries' flags in the ground, and they rotate leadership over this area. And the Russians have poured a lot of money in there. Now the Chinese are beginning to pour a lot of money in there, and they do things like deep ice core drilling. They do neutrino research. They of course, all of that information is funded and sought after ultimately by military concerns. And you can just put two and two together. They're looking for better surveillance. They're looking for maybe warning signs of things planetary, things extraplanetary happening. But I think they're looking for a leg up with respect to national defense.
So I read an article, Brooks, a while ago that talked about this bacteria that was possibly hundreds of millions of years old that hasn't been, in contact with the modern era, for such a long time. But scientists are actually going to experiment with it and see what it can do. So what are your thoughts on that kind of stuff, tapping into this old school bacteria?
Well, my brother's a molecular biologist, retired now, but very well accomplished in his little area. And he says all biology is molecular, which I tend to agree with. I didn't go into biology, although I have a degree in it. I stayed more with the chemistry and the mathematics side, and I like building stuff instead of looking at pond water. But there is a structure underneath Antarctica known as Lake Vostok. And it is encapsulated. It's an encapsulated environment for a long, long time. It sits under thousands of feet of ice, and it's been there for a long, long time. But it's also warmed by volcanic activity deep under the surface on the actual continent, and so it has, I'll just call it temperate growing conditions. And you have to understand, to drill in ice that's that cold, that's that deep, it has to be done with a lubricant that won't freeze. And they use alcohol. They pour alcohol in the hole and they drill. Well, for 25 years, you could only drill for about 90 days. And then you shut the whole system down, leave, and then come back in the next Antarctic summer. But this discovery that there was this possibility of this bacteria, and there were other items down there. There was a source of radiation that they wanted to validate. They decided to drill through the winter. So they put a crew down there, and they stayed through the winter, and they kept drilling with the alcohol drill. And the latest papers that I've been able to read is they did get into this environment, and they did discover microbial life forms that have been separated from we surface dwellers for a long, long time. And, you know, there's always the danger of exposing the ecosystem of modern man to an ecosystem that has had its own, you know, immunobiology separated from mankind for a long, long time. In other words, modern man may not have an immunity to whatever it is that's down there should it develop an infection. And there was the worry that if this bacteria got out, it might go through the entire human race before somebody develops an immunity for it. And that would be obviously devastating to the planet. So there are lots and lots of precautions that were used to keep that from happening. Now, you're asking me the question, you know, did they get the bacteria? Is it in some bioweapons lab somewhere? And the answer is probably. But I don't know what else to tell you about that.
Do you feel that the history that we're taught is overall pretty accurate as far as the human history?
I would say absolutely not. One thing that I've discovered in writing the 4-book series, The Arc of Millions of Years, is that history was written by the victors. When you go back and you find evidence of the history of the losers, it paints a completely different picture of the anthropology, or let's just call it the sociology of the development of the race of mankind. And in fact, I just published a book last week called Birth, Two Earths, One Race for Time. Now, it's a true story, but it's with fictional characters. I try to bring it to life because I would like to make a big screen movie out of it. But I took most of the evidence that we discovered studying these 40 ancient cultures around the world, and we successfully paint a completely different sociological development up till now. And the fact that what we see happening as a pattern in our modern times is the culmination of a very long and focused plan to basically capture all of mankind in one system. And it has not altered in thousands of years of history. And I got to tell you, mankind just doesn't think that way. We don't think in terms of thousands of years. We might think in terms of dozens of years, but you know, look at Wall Street. It's more concerned with quarterly profits. That's how small they've got their sights set. But
Right.
this force that has been working on this planet and working on the people on this planet has not wavered from its goal in a long, long time, hundreds and hundreds of generations. And mankind just doesn't work that way. So it lends evidence to the ancient assertion that there is another, albeit small, race here on this planet of immense lifespan that is directing things from behind the scenes. Now, they have come out, and we see their drawings. We see their likenesses all over the ancient record, but they don't last well against mankind. I mean, face it, we breed like rabbits. And, you know, if there's a few hundred of these guys, they don't bode well against armies of 50,000 men, even if they've got clubs. And so what they've learned, obviously, is not to go to war with us. What they do is they go to battle with us. And we really haven't fought a war in this country, or in the world, actually, for a long, long time. We fought a war in the early 1900s, which we thought was the war to end all wars. but it didn't. They rested for a while, rebuilt the machine. We went back to war with the same players and did it again. And this time we blew up, an atom bomb and a hydrogen bomb. And we thought, okay, that's the war to end all wars. But we have been fighting ever since. Not the same way. We don't put uniforms on. We don't go meet on the battlefield and, fight it out until we take this hill or that hill. It's a different kind of war. It's a war of battles, and it goes on and on and on, and it never, ever changes its goal.
And I'm so glad you brought this up, because there's a lot of different theories as to who the people are behind the scenes that are orchestrating these things. But I got to tell you, there certainly is something going on. I mean, you look at the numerological significance of events that happen at certain times, and just these dogmatic principles that these leaders take into their, everyday repertoire. And, so whether they're archons or reptilians or demons or fallen angels or extraterrestrials, whatever, it certainly seems like there's something there. And they feed off of this dark ecstasy or all of this pain and suffering from wars or whatever it is.
Well, that is certainly evident, and I would check the box all of the above on what you just mentioned. But there is an end game. There is an end game, and it's the same end game for every world. There are sentient beings upon this planet, which we call humans, and we choose evil or we choose good. And it's prophesied in every major tradition, going back all the way to, the oldest book we have, which is the Sefer Yetzirah, that there is going to happen in the last days, and it all seems to point to this 21st century, a grand division. And this grand division will separate all of the dark side people from all of the light side people. Now, what does that mean, really? It means most people, it seems, really don't need laws. We just obey rules of society because they are given by God, and we obey them naturally. We don't have to have police. We don't have to have laws. We don't have to have rules that say, don't pick up this item from the store and stuff it in your pocket and walk out. We just don't do it. But there is a percentage that refuses to obey that. In fact, they're incapable of obeying that. And it wasn't until I interviewed several criminal psychologists that really opened my eyes. I know this is going to shock you. It shocked me when I learned it. It really shocked me. But there's a class of human being that actually is aroused sexually by harming other people. And I said, no, tell me that again. As I was interviewing this one psychologist, he said there are individuals that will punch someone in the nose, and then when they see the blood coming out of their nose, they actually get an erection. How can you battle that? You cannot battle that. This is a force that's built into that person from the time they were born. And now what we're seeing is a whole race of these people who enjoy beheading and raping and murdering and inflicting pain and want to see the entire world fall under that kind of terror. And so when you hear the term a war on terror, that's what they're meaning. It's a war on that kind of human being. Well, where did that human being come from? Where did that human being come from? Where did that race come from? You have to go all the way back to Genesis to find that race. And it has been proliferating on the sidelines, and we have fought it many, many times throughout history. And that race is responsible for nearly 1 billion murders, wholesale genocide over the last few thousand years. It absolutely boggles the mind.
No, so who is the race?
The race, and I have to thank Zen Garcia for this fine research that he did and the assertions that he makes in his paper. And I go into this in the book. In the Garden of Eden, a lot of people don't really read the creation, but we did in the Ark of Millions of Years series. And one of my friends, the late Kevin Smith, wrote it in his book, Gods in the Garden. Really, really opens the eyes. What we realize is that there are two Adams. There are two races of men. One is what the ancients call lower Adam, which was placed here on the earth to till the ground and multiply and replenish the earth, blah, blah, blah. But then there was Adam. Adam was created from the dirt of the earth. However, God used that to build Adam piece by piece. He built him. So probably Adam didn't have a belly button. He was built, and then the Spirit of God, or his spirit, was instilled in him by God. I just take it as literally as it was written. But then Adam is alone in the garden for almost 1,000 years, if you consider one day 1,000 years. And during that time, he names all the animals on the earth, which probably could take 1,000 years. But at the end of that period, he is put to sleep, a rib is taken from him, and a female is cloned from his rib. Now, she is implanted in a womb somewhere on another world, birthed by a surrogate mother, born, raised to young adulthood, and then brought back to earth and delivered to Adam in the Garden of Eden. And this is the end of the 6th day. He's lived the entire 6th day by himself in the Garden of Eden. And then God goes away for a day, the 7th day. Well, during that day, she gets visited by Lucifer in the garden somewhere. Who knows how big the garden was. But Lucifer beguiles her. He seduces her. And she bears a son whose name is Cain. And then she goes to Adam and says, hey, I've had this great experience. You should try it, blah, blah, blah. However you want to read into that. But then she has relations with Adam, and Adam bears Abel. That is where the race came from. It is Lucifer's seed alive and proliferating on this planet.
Now, a lot of speculation about that bloodline and ties with Rh negative blood, as well as many of the leaders today, top aristocratic people, and you look at their generational lineage that goes back to the pharaohs of Egypt, according to some ancestry websites. So is that kind of who you think the victors are, and possibly this faction of people that just feed off of hurting others?
You're asking me to speculate, and I will. But I will say that the record is pretty clear. It says, there's really no test for it, but it says, you shall know them by their fruits. So if we just look at the fruits of them, you can spot them right off. Now, you can call it profiling, you can call it prejudice, you can call it Islamophobia, whatever you want to call it. There is a political realm that does not want this recognized. They don't want it recognized. The last time it was really recognized was when Thomas Jefferson was president. And what he did is he organized the Navy and sent the Navy to Tripoli and fought them and defeated them. And the people that he sent were Marines. These were tough guys. They just came through the Revolutionary War. But they were outfitted with leather collars. They wore a leather collar around their neck to keep their head from being sliced off by these guys while they were fighting them. And that's where the term leatherneck came from. And it's interesting to note that as they defeated these Barbary pirates, which were no small or disorganized group in the 1700s, they did that on the shores of Tripoli. Now, when you see ISIS doing its marketing plan, they march people out in orange jumpsuits. Where? On the shores of Tripoli. And they beheaded them on film for the world to see, and then basically said, come and get us. We want to fight you. That makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, not to a reasonable thinking man, but to someone who's trying to organize the battle to end all battles or instill fear in the world. Hey, we're still here and we're ready to go to war. It's perfect.
Every end game is the same for these people. So, and you talk about, the two atoms. Do you think they've done this to different planets?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. This
like
is
planet
the end game
killers
for every world. Yeah, because people think, well, Lucifer's going to lose. Well, yeah, he's going to lose the war, but he's going to win a lot of battles. Well, what does that mean to win? It means that the spirits that are born here on the earth of their own free will and choice chose evil. He wins. And he does this world after world after world after world, and he's doing it right here. And right now, there are 7 billion of us alive on the planet. The planet's getting ready to go through this massive cataclysmic transition, which I describe in the book. That's why it's called Birth, 2 Earths, 1 race for time. When the 2 Earths come apart, when the spirit Earth separates from the temporal Earth, the ones left on the temporal Earth are Lucifer's victory. He wins a certain number of souls away from the creation of God. This is the war in the universe.
It's interesting, too, because the Sumerian tablets that were translated by Zacharias Sitchin, he describes these people that came from Nibiru to harvest gold for their planet. And I thought to myself, okay, maybe that is the case. But with a race of people that had that type of technology, wouldn't it be just as easy for them to produce gold from some type of matter that's? And then I thought to myself, well, maybe it's more sinister than that. And this is just speculation, but this is kind of what my gut tells me. If there is a little bit of truth to that, and you're talking about how Lucifer is trying to take people's souls, and that's his winnings. well, maybe our DNA was altered at a certain time and we were promised something.
Well, I think you're almost there. What seems to coalesce, or shall we say, we run the filter of time through this. What seems to coalesce out of it is that if he takes somebody by force, if he blows them up with a bomb, or he kills them with a bioweapon or whatever, he doesn't win, because the soul is redeemed, especially if it's a good person. But if he can convince that person to choose wickedness, to break down the family, to make marriage obsolete, to make people choose of their own free will and choice his way, then he wins, because then that person becomes inherently evil all by themselves. They become wickedness themselves, and he can then step away and just watch it happen. But the idea, I mean, it was pretty clear in the days of Noah that this genetic manipulation by the Watchers that was going on the earth, the generation of giants and all of the aberrations that occurred by the blending of Watcher DNA and animal DNA, the Lord was going to lose the creation. And so he had to cleanse the earth. So he basically had a flood, wiped out all the giants. The Nephilim left the planet. They came back after the flood in the book of Numbers, and they continue their nefarious acts today. They just don't manipulate DNA anymore. They don't have to. All they have to do is manipulate or win the minds and hearts of races. And these, like you mentioned, the powers that be, these elites that have a certain bloodline, to teach them that 1,000 lifetimes worth of wealth is not enough. You have to have more. You have to own more. You got to control more. In fact, it isn't enough to win. All others must lose. And when you instill this mindset in enough powerful people, and you give weapons to both sides, you can make them fight forever, which is exactly what you want.
There's also a lot of evidence that points to civilizations that traveled this solar system that were just incredibly advanced. I mean, you look at possible structures on Iapetus that orbit Saturn, one of the inner moons that orbits Saturn. A lot of stuff on our own moon, Mars, Cydonia, images from JPL and NASA that clearly look like structures. And a lot of the stuff looks like it could be just thousands, tens of thousands of years old. I'm wondering if Mars, etc., it was once like Earth, and then like what you're talking about could possibly take place here within the next several years, happen there, and now they're going through a rebirth.
Well, we're learning more about that for sure. We've run a lot more missions to Venus than we have Mars, but Mars is certainly the headline now, and now there are private companies looking at Mars, and there's evidence that we're getting, it's ancient, but we're getting it slowly but surely out of the soil, that at one time Mars had a functional atmosphere and had surface water, which is what you need to support life. But it's still, 43 million miles at its closest point further away from the sun than we are. And it's going to be very difficult to support life there unless you want to live in mucklucks and a parka all the time.
So you believe the official version of NASA as far as what they say the atmosphere and the land is like out there?
Well, you can look at Mars from Earth and you can see storms. You can see that it has an atmosphere, that it has weather. But and I've been at 23,000 feet here on the Earth without oxygen. It's hard to breathe. But
did you climb Everest?
No, I made it to base camp. We weren't there to climb Everest. We were there just to visit and see how high we could go. And in fact, I have some film that I shot at 18,500 feet, and it was difficult to breathe, but it wasn't unlivable by any means. And that's about the same atmospheric pressure as you have on Mars. You're going to end up with cataracts on the Earth because you're so close to the sun without any protection from the atmosphere, and they have tremendous problems with cataracts in Tibet. But as far as living and breathing and working, you can acclimate to it. You just need the right clothing and watch your blood oxygen levels. But you can acclimate to it. In 1 or 2 generations, you easily could acclimate to it.
Now, do you think Venus is livable?
Well, it's not very likely. The atmospheric pressure is about 30 times what it is here on Earth, which would be the equivalent of being about 900 feet under the water. So, yes, I mean, humans can survive at 900 feet. But you're going to have a special environment. You're going to have breathing apparatus, obviously, but you could build structures that you can live at 900 feet virtually indefinitely. It's not improbable to do, but the atmosphere itself is liquid, so you'd have to have shelter for sure.
Well, I just asked because you said that NASA has taken a lot more journeys there, right, than Mars?
Yeah, a lot more missions to Venus than Mars.
I'm wondering why that would be the case.
Well, mostly they were trying to float observatories in the atmosphere. They were trying to get information from it, and just Venus was the hot item back in the 70s and 80s, and now Mars is the hot item. Of course, it's a lot further away, and it's further away from the sun is more difficult to do. It takes about, depending on how fast you fly, 3 to 4 months to get to Mars. And the communication system, and I had conversation with Jim Bell, who at that time was running the Mars rover program, the first Opportunity and Spirit rovers that were successful. And I asked him, what are the major challenges that you have in working on Mars? And he said, well, it's communications with the rovers, because what they have to do is send the code to Marsus, which is a satellite that orbits Mars. It has a large dish on it, and it can pick up the information that we send to Mars, but then it goes around to where the rover is, downloads the information into the rover. The rover then follows those instructions, gathers the samples, uploads the information to Marsus. Marsus gets around to Earth side of the planet, sends the information back to Earth, and the whole process takes about 16 minutes. That's like a dial-up modem on molasses. So I told him, well, why don't you just put a beryllium ion modem in both units, and then you can have real-time communication. And the phone went silent for a little bit, and he said, I'm not familiar with what a beryllium ion modem is. And I said, well, Jim, that's because it hasn't been invented yet, but here's how it works. And I explained it to him, and I'm pretty sure they're working on that right now.
Oh, that's great. I hope it works out.
Oh, it will. It's just simple switching system. It just works off entangled particle theory.
When you did that really cool expedition back in 2006, you traveled the globe, you went to some really neat spots. Did that convince you more that there's...
Well, it did. And the interesting thing, I approached this as a null hypothesis. I said, okay, Earth is formed just the way we think it is. It's a big molten ball floating through space, and we live on a cool crust that's floating on this molten ball, and that's the way we were taught that our planet is formed, and I'm going to look for evidence to support that. And I'll be honest with you, after 7 years, I could not find any evidence to support that. All the evidence supported the idea that we have a solid core that's probably metal, probably iron. It is rotating at a different speed than the crust, probably faster, if conservation of momentum is still a good physical theory. And that counter rotation between the core and the metal crust is what's creating the magnetosphere that we have on the planet. And that there's an air gap between the core and the crust being about 800, maybe 900 miles thick. And that mantle, that outer crust, that 800 or 900 mile thick crust, is what contains not only all the magma that we see as volcanic activity, but also contains all of the earthquakes that we have, because earthquakes obviously can't travel through air on the inside of the planet. And I said, eventually we're going to find evidence that on the inside of the crust, because there's a significant amount of gravity in the crust of the Earth, not only from the surface, but from the inside, we're going to find that there are oceans on the inside of that crust. And lo and behold, that's exactly the evidence that we found.
You know the old movie that came out, I think, in the 60s of the Hollow Earth, where there's like dinosaurs and all sorts of...
Yeah.
Now, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think that's a possibility?
Well, you're talking about Jules Verne. What an incredible visionary this guy was.
Yeah.
Here he creates this book called Journey to the Center of the Earth, and it was made into a movie. And I think it had Richard York and a bunch of other people. They were talking about Arnie Saknussemm, who had, gone into the inner planet and somehow left a message for people. And so modern explorers went in to try to follow his trail. And what they found was, of course, inner ocean and a whole different set of life form that had not gone through the same extinction events that the surface dwellers had gone through. And then they're expelled back out to the surface by a volcanic blast. What a great story, but what a visionary this guy was. That, he talked about going to the moon. He talked about going, deep under the ocean. None of that stuff was possible when he wrote these stories. And he's just been, that's where science comes from, is from science fiction. It's from the imagination of these great visionaries.
So if we had the opportunity to drill a 1,100 foot deep hole from a flat, from an area that was sea level, would that go like literally take us to the inner Earth through the lava cores, and then bang, we're in the hollow Earth?
You said 1,100 feet. I've drilled dozens and dozens of 1,100-foot holes. The deepest hole that has ever been drilled, and it's in Russia, is just about 42,000 feet. Now, you got to imagine
Wow.
8 miles of steel suspended from a Kelly. It is horrendous temperatures, and the structure that they have built to drill these holes is just boggles the mind how sophisticated this is and how many technological problems they had to overcome. They have to use lubricant on the drill in the hole in order to get the drill to turn without snapping the steel. It is really, really a technical, but that's 8 miles. I'm talking about a crust that's 800 to 900 miles thick. We have absolutely no idea what the structure of this crust is.
Now, I heard once that there might be like a crystalline core.
Well, you probably heard it twice. The first was a theory that was done by a joint effort between Europe and the United States. And the theory, or the hypothesis, was put forth that we do have a solid crystalline core that's probably iron. And spectrographically, they confirmed it. But then they reported that it only had a temperature of 5,000 degrees K. And that's where the whole thing fell apart, because that just couldn't be. The temperature was off by 1,000 degrees. So another experiment was done, this time joint European-Japan. And what they did is they developed what's called a micro anvil, and they recreated the pressures of a iron crystal, and then brought the temperature up to where it would begin to put forth light. And it was 6,000 degrees K. And that is what confirmed it. The spectrographical data lined up, the temperature data lined up, and the crystalline structure was maintained. So, we're talking about advanced metallurgy here, but it took lots of tries and lots of experiments to confirm that the core of the Earth actually is one single molecule, not an atom, one single molecule of iron in crystalline formation. And it is at a temperature of 6,000 degrees K, which would put off a very white light, although it would not be anything like our sun. We're not talking about a fusion reaction. We're just talking about electrons jumping from one valence shell to the other and creating a photon of light in the visible band.
Which in return would be able to harvest or to sustain life of some sort.
That's a good question, because there have been no experiments done that I know of to see if photosynthesis of any kind can be propagated by that photon of light. We know that it can from visible light from the sun, but we're not exactly sure if it's these very short, 300 nanometer wavelengths that are causing the photosynthesis, or if it can be the longer wavelengths, which would be in the 500 to 700 nanometer range, that would be put off by iron.
And you were talking earlier, we were getting into some of the biblical stuff. There was a recent 3-part series that came out called Childhood's End by the famous novel. Have you had an opportunity to read that book?
I haven't, and I've avoided the series on TV because I was in the process of writing this book, Birth, which is now turned into a trilogy, and it's a big screen movie. So I first wrote the screenplay in 2011 and won a few contests with it, but I couldn't seem to get it, funded into a film. Well, joined the crowd of 10,000 other screenwriters. So I didn't want to let the story sit there, because it was gleaned from the 2,000-page work that we did called The Arc of Millions of Years. I wanted to make sure that it got out there. So I took the screenplay and I fleshed it out into a novel, which is a true story with fictional characters. This new book I just released this week called Birth. And it's a white-knuckle ride. This book teaches all these principles, but it also takes you through this story. And all of the events in it are real. All the billionaires, all the politicians, everyone that's in it is real. I didn't change any of the names because they're all freaking guilty. But the characters are fictional. But I've had several reviews now, and the reviews are very good. And I will tell you, for your listeners, if they buy the book, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Nook, I don't care, email me the receipt, and I will send you the entire book in audio for free. So if you're not a great reader, don't worry about it. I read it for you.
Oh, that's cool. And it sounds like it's going to be fascinating, and the dots that you connect. And I'm really looking forward to reading it.
It's so funny. I had a couple that said, look, we bought the book, but we're getting ready to take a road trip and we want to listen to your audiobook, while we're driving. So I sent it to them and I got an email the next day. Well, we had to delay our road trip because we stayed up all night listening to the audiobook. We couldn't stop and say, look, let's get some sleep. We'll take our trip and we'll listen to it in the car. No. They just stayed up all night and listened to it.
Well, do you have other books that you do audio on as well?
Yeah, I do all the books except for volumes 3 and 4 of The Ark of Millions of Years. I did the first 2 volumes, and then, of course, I did Alienated Nation, which is actually made it to #1 on Amazon. It sold a bunch of copies. And that is a book about the Article 5 convention that we're trying to get going. You've heard some news about that. I wrote it in 2012 and sent a copy to all the governors, and it's been very instrumental in helping to get this movement going to amend the Constitution to undo the power that the agencies have over our country. And then the other book's called Remembering the Future, The Physics of the Soul and Time Travel. And this is based on the 3rd book of The Ark of Millions of Years, which I did not make an audio of because of a mathematical discovery that I made while we were writing that book. And it basically allowed us access to time and also allowed us access. It explains this law of attraction and why it works. So that's what that book is about. It's basically a self-help book with a science fiction title.
You just talked about time travel you brought that up. Do you feel that right now the technology, there's possibly technologies, black budget type stuff where they have harnessed the ability to time travel?
Well, here's my feeling on that. If it takes us 50,000 years to develop time travel, then it exists right now. I mean, just think about it.
Right, exactly.
They're going to be coming back to here. The idea it came from physics, where I was actually talking with a colleague of mine whose name is Dr. Ed Close. He wrote a book called Transcendental Physics, which I found to be fascinating. So I called him up one night and we spoke for about 3 hours. And at the end of that, we concluded that when I brought up the theoretical question, if I'm on the star Arcturus and I'm a photon and I leave Arcturus and I head for Earth and I reach my eye here on my telescope here on the Earth. So this photon has traveled through 8+ years of light speed to reach me, and it's avoided all kinds of obstacles along the way to reach me so I can see Arcturus. And his theory is that there's no pathway for this photon from Arcturus to here, that it's instantaneous. And his claim was, at the speed of light, mass becomes infinity, obviously. But if you expand out the mathematical relationship, you discover that time actually becomes 0. It becomes asymptotic. And as it's asymptotic, from the photon's perspective, time does not exist. Everything is local. And that's where the observation effect and time travel really started to make sense to me. So I mix that with resonance theory and the Fibonacci sequence, and it becomes very, very logical how we put ideas out into the future, actually any ideas, and how they can coalesce into reality.
Well, it all starts via thought with your imagination, because that electronic impulse, that's all connected. So I really like the way you put that too, and you explained it very eloquently. And that makes me think of the infamous John Titor. Do you think that guy was legit, or do you feel that was a big hoax?
Well, even if it was a big hoax, it was very entertaining. And some of the things that he said kind of came to pass. I tried it myself in Remembering the Future. I wrote it in 2007. And I have a chapter in there that I wrote from the year 2015. I was in 2015 and I was looking back at 2007 and I was writing this history book. And the interesting thing about that, I talk about the weather, I talk about the presidency, I talk about economic situations and what's going on with the banks. This is in 2007, the crash, none of that had happened. And almost everything that I wrote in there came to pass. So then I got worried. I said to myself, gosh, did I manifest that by putting that thought out there in the future? And then I convinced myself, and I'm still convinced, that I did not manifest that. I just picked up the resonations of the manifestations of others who had put those things out into the future. And I reported them, and they turned out to be accurate. And I think maybe that's what prophets do.
Well, and you're obviously very well versed in quantum entanglement and quantum physics. I've interviewed Daz Smith, Dick Allgaier, Courtney Brown. Those guys are in top of their fields when it comes to remote viewing. And I talked to Daz about it, and he just kind of explains the way that it's done. You basically tap into your subconscious, because your subconscious is connected to everything at the quantum level. So with that said, do you feel like, let's talk about the Bible for a minute, because you brought up Genesis and Numbers. Revelations talks about the end times, and the New Jerusalem descending from the heavens, and these locusts with breastplates and crowns that are going to sting people for either 3 months or 6 months and not kill them. I can't remember the exact amount of time. And you can parallel that to drones and other things, I guess, if you have a pretty good imagination. But do you think that those books and millions of people reading those books kind of helps manifest it in and of itself? It creates that reality?
There's no question about it. In fact, in the book Remembering the Future, I make the comment that we have a book that tells us what a future has for us if we continue doing the things that we're doing, or not doing the things we're supposed to be doing. We know that future. We're pretty familiar with that future. Now, if you're happy with that, then just stick with it. But if you think you would rather create another future and not march inexorably toward Armageddon, you have the right to do that. We're in the past. We can make any future we want. We just have to manifest it as a people. 1 or 2 people is not enough. We have to get millions of consciousnesses behind a different path, and we have to choose a new future. And it is our right to do that. And no God or host of gods can stop that. That's why the book was written in the first place.
Also, the Nag Hammadi treatise that has many of the books that are in the Old Testament and the New Testament. There's a book called The Secret Book of John that talks about the archons. Are you familiar with those texts?
Yeah, I mean, the original translation that came from Nag Hammadi was really splintered and fragmented. And there have been scholars, multilingual scholars, and I trust some of the scholars. I've known some of them, and they pieced together the fragments and tried to, as best they could, recreate what they found from those cut up copper scrolls from the cliffs of Nag Hammadi. I've been to Nag Hammadi. I've seen where the books came from, and it is not an easy place to get to. That's for sure. It's up right in a cliff face. You actually have to rappel down to the cave where the pots were found. I don't know how they got them in there in the first place, but they were well hidden. They were actually discovered in the 40s and made it to different private collections around the world. And then over time, they were recollected. And so you can tell that the whole record wasn't recovered. And the record that was recovered had to be cut apart because it couldn't be unrolled and then put back together. And so it was fragmented for a dozen years. And I think that some of the text, like Isaiah, has been copied over so many times in so many places. We have a pretty good idea what is legitimate Isaiah and what is not legitimate Isaiah. But when it comes to these more apocryphal books, like the book of John or the book of Mary, there are only a couple copies, and they're so fragmented. There's a lot of different ways they could go. But nevertheless, there are pieces not only that corroborate the story that we traditionally have about Christianity, but there are also pieces that refute certain aspects of that Christianity. And I think the jury's still out. I'm a scientist. I have to go by the data, and then I weigh things in my mind, and sometimes you come to a firm conclusion, and sometimes you say, well, there's a question there.
Absolutely. And also, the reason I brought up the Nag Hammadi treatise is because they talk about the archons, and if you read the overall underlying theme of the archons, they're these parasitic entities that feed off of us, basically, in the realms that we can't see. And I'm wondering if these archons are one and the same with the Watchers or the Nephilim, or if they're actually like this parasitic fungus that has attached to these fallen angels and controls them, kind of like the body snatchers.
Well, all that's very fascinating, and I think that given the direction of mankind, and I'm talking about the sociology of mankind here on the planet, I can't deny that there is some corporal, very well-focused intelligence that speaks to the wickedness of men and directs them and rewards them and then ultimately betrays them. But the fact that we're aware of that, the fact that on this planet right now, there are pockets of very intense light, and programs like Leak Project and X Squared Radio and other projects like that, we're beginning to stitch that light together into a fabric. And I think we can change. We can starve the archons to death, as it were.
Absolutely. And also, you watch a lot of these famous movie stars and people in the entertainment industry that use these specific hand signs, and then they'll be interviewed on talk shows, and they'll jokingly say that they sold their soul to the devil. Roseanne Barr came out a few years ago and said that she had to refinance her soul. Basically, she said that she had to refinance it because she was losing some fame, so she refinanced her soul to the devil. And I'm wondering what your thought is on that, because you've obviously, you do have a strong opinion on Lucifer, because we've been talking about that. Do you think they actually sign a blood contract, and then after this physical life, they are succumb to whatever the Dark Lord tells them to do, or what?
I definitely think that there is an agreement that's made, and when you look at the individuals who are granted great power, and the power is almost mystical. For instance, the recent election that they had in Iowa, where it was a virtual tie between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. And then in the precincts where it was a tie, they had an odd delegate that they had to give to somebody, because they had 7 delegates and they basically had exactly the same number of votes. So who did they give the 4th delegate to? So they agreed to flip a coin, which I thought, that's really weird, a game of chance to decide who wins the election. But here's the strange thing.
Right.
Hillary Clinton wins all 6 tosses.
Right.
That is 6 factorial. So when you figure that out, that's about a 1.5% chance that she could have done that. But she did it. And the fact that she was rewarded not with an equal number of delegates, but because she had the super delegates in New Hampshire, she ended up with 17 delegates and he ended up with 13, even though she lost the election by a long shot. Who makes those deals? Well, you start to see that you have refinanced your soul in order to win these elections. And as I said, the betrayal always comes.
Also, that the number 6, 666, the mark of the beast. In Revelations, it says the number 6 threefold is the number of man. And then I wonder, okay, so what's, and I may not be exact on those words, but I'm pretty darn close. So if you want to go ahead and look it up, for those that are listening, please do so. It's in Revelations. Most of our body is made up of water and carbon, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so carbon atoms have 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons.
Well, yeah, I do. I think all of that is significant. I don't really know what to make of some of the cryptic language in the book of Revelation, but it's, John exiled to the Isle of Patmos because they couldn't kill him. I think they tried 3 times to kill him, and they finally said, well, let's just exile him to Patmos and let him die of old age. So he crafts the book of Revelation, which could be a look into the past of how Earth was formed and some of the cataclysms that it went through. Many think that it's a look into the future of cataclysms that Earth has yet to go through. There was a book written by Immanuel Velikovsky called Worlds in Collision, for which he was publicly excoriated when he wrote it. It has been read, over the decades and revered by non-physicists, I will say. But the evidence of what went on in our solar system is written quite carefully in that book, and it seems to match some of the language that we see in the book of Revelation. So was John talking about events that had already happened in our solar system and on Earth, or events that are going to happen? And the answer is no one really knows. No one really knows. So when it comes to these cryptic things about man being inherently evil, I don't believe that. I believe that man, at least the mankind that I know, is inherently good, wants to be merciful, wants to love their children, wants to do well. What happens is, on this planet, we get trapped into desiring stuff. And these actors and actresses that make, obscene amounts of money, and then go through that money living this crazy lifestyle of opulence, find themselves on the poor end of the stick again, and then realize, hey, I gotta refinance my soul and get back to where I was. And that's exactly the wrong lesson to learn. The lesson to learn is, I don't need all that stuff. Once you get to the point where you have all that stuff and you realize, you know what, I'm not happy, I got to take some drugs to make myself happy again. You realize it's not the stuff that makes you happy. It's realizing what you can do and what you can be in this world that makes you happy, not the stuff you have.
That's a good way to put it. And it really makes me think of that song that Trent Reznor wrote several years ago. In the lyrics, he says, "You could have it all. My empire's of dirt. I will let you down. I will make you hurt." And I think in that song, he's referring to selling his soul to the devil. It's very interesting. It's sad,
sure, exactly.
It really is, because you look at some of these people out there that just have so much, so much talent, and you wonder where in life did they fall victim to this, parasitic feeling of having to have this desire for all this stuff, giant mansions and yachts and fortune and fame. It's such a large price to pay. But, I mean, I'm not trying to judge anybody. If that's what they want to do, hey, that's awesome. Everybody has their own path. It's really unfortunate. It'd be nice to see, and also, Brooks, it just seems like the longer I've been watching the media and really getting into what it does to people, it seems like it's just getting darker, and every single year more of a shock factor is put in there to just kind of take people astray and mess them up.
Well, it also gets lighter. I think that there is a dark side that appeals to that, and it is repulsive. It is really repulsive to some of us who see it. But you have to remember the quote, that we once abhor, we soon tolerate, then embrace.
Right.
And if you'll stay aware and awake and close to the light, you realize I'm being trapped here. It was interesting you brought this up. I was in economics class, and the instructor gave us an assignment to figure out how much money a person could spend in a year. How much money can you go through in a year? Well, I mean, we were like Brewster's Millions, right? No. There's some rules.
That's a good movie. Yeah.
You can't buy stuff that you can't use. So we're talking about clothes you could wear, food you could eat, travel you could make. How much could you possibly spend in a year? And the class came up with a number that we all agreed would exhaust a person. You wouldn't be able to sleep a single day, more than 8 hours a day, because you just could not go through all the money. You couldn't eat enough. You couldn't wear enough. You couldn't travel enough. You couldn't see enough films, whatever. It was $770,000 a year. That was it. That was the maximum that a person could spend. And so the economics teacher asked us, so why is it that a billionaire wants to have 10 billion, wants to have 20 billion? How much is enough? And he asked us the question, if I paid you $1,000 a day, every day, 365 days a year, how long would $1 million last? Well, that's pretty easy to do. It's just a little under 3 years. He said, okay, I'm going to increase it now to $10,000 a day that you can spend. That's a lot of money to spend on consumables, right?
Right.
And I'm going to raise it to $1 billion. Now how long will it last? And the answer is 300 years. 300 years. 6 lifetimes, or let's call it 5 lifetimes.
Right.
That's an incredible amount of money. And yet we see, fewer than 4 or 5 dozen people on the earth that have enough that control basically all the cash on the planet.
Right. And it's also sad because over 90% of the media is controlled by 6 giant corporations. Over 90% of the scientific studies and all the research in the medical industries are controlled by literally 6 organizations. So virtually everything that's out there, unless you're fortunate enough to find these hidden gems like you discuss on your show and in your books, and it's very difficult to get accurate information, let alone enough of it to make a valuable difference. And it just makes me think again, follow your gut. I remember
well, at the same time, though, it's a lot easier
because
you're not controlled. Leak Project's not controlled by that money. X Squared Radio's not. And there's probably 10,000 podcast radio programs out there that are not controlled by that. It's easier now to find the truth and the enlightenment than ever before. And we should be about doing it. Your listeners, my listeners, and listeners we don't even have yet.
Absolutely. And it's really making a big impact. Even though this is online podcast, I look at the numbers here with the Leak Project, and it's a lot more than some of these FM and AM radio stations that are out there. So people are really making a difference. And, you've been in the scene for so long, and you have so much knowledge and experience in different aspects of mathematics and chemistry and inventions and patents. It's just really
You make me feel
remarkable.
old.
Well, hey man, I've seen not at all. I mean, you've obtained all this in a very short amount of time. I mean, you look at, you came out with your first book at the age of 13. That's incredible. And
No, I didn't. That was an article. My first published article was when I was 13. I didn't write my first book until I was 52.
okay, so I apologize. Your first article when you were 13. Yeah, a little bit of a difference there. But, and also I wanted to jump into, you're talking about Paris and this big group of world leaders that are going to get together and decide the future of mankind in a lot of ways in industry. Isn't it interesting that the Bataclan attacks happened like a week before they got together?
It is interesting. And it's also interesting to note the frustration that this group has. These Bilderbergs or groups like that, they're very frustrated because they are becoming increasingly unable to control the world and decide what is going to be the next fad and what religion people are going to ascribe to or what war we're going to have. Because of us. It's because of us. We're changing that.
So I wonder, though, if those attacks that happened, if there was some type of false flag scenario there to defer the attention of the, this big event that was taking place.
Well, there's no question. Here's a really good example for you. You remember the Charlie Hebdo event, right, where the satirical newspaper in France was shot up by these two brothers. Well, I did a little history on these two brothers. These two brothers grew up in a no-go zone there in France, and these two guys were basically bottle chuckers. Okay, they would show up at a riot here or there, and they would throw bottles at cops, and that was about it. So one day, out of the blue, they decide to put on the latest, ISIS garb, take two semi-automatic weapons and go charging downtown to kill a bunch of people. Realizing, of course, that France is totally surveilled by camera, and it's only going to be a matter of hours before they trace them back to where they got out of bed that morning, and they're going to trace them down and kill them. So they're basically committing suicide, and they know it. So that's not the strange part, that one day they just wake up and say, I've had enough of this. Let's go take out a bunch of people before we go. That's not completely unbelievable. What is unbelievable is a few days later, 40 world leaders march elbow to elbow as a protest in France against this kind of activity. And when you watch the cameras, and by the way, Obama wasn't there, when you watch the cameras on this front wave of people, by the way, there's 170,000 French people behind them. Where are these people looking? Well, they're not looking at the cameras. They're looking at the tops of the buildings on either side of the street thinking, I'm sitting out here, I could be assassinated at any moment. They're scared to death out there. So my question is, who got them to cancel their very busy schedules, 40 world leaders, jump in their jets, fly to Paris on the QT? There was no announcement that all these people were going to show up. And they just show up on this street to take this march. Who ordered them there? And whose order did Obama disobey by not showing up? That's the real question. Who got all those world leaders there in front of that camera to make that march?
I mean, is there any way to find out?
Well, I'm sure there is, but I don't have the ability. I don't have the context to find out. The question is the question. Somebody needs to ask that question. You got Merkel and Hollande, and you got leaders from the United Arab Emirates and other nations to get on their private jets and fly all in one place at one time to basically be sitting ducks in the middle of terrorist central.
Just doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense whatsoever, unless you're right. It's all a show.
And then let's even get into this whole world as a stage, and this is just one of many that I could pick out very easily. You've got Kim Jong-un, that's threatening to send a bunch of nukes to California. He even points out the locations on a map, and he's just bragging about it. And then they've got these incredible photo shoots where he's on the beach with his military buddies that look like they're about ready to, join AARP and get set into some nursing home, walking with basically walkers and oxygen almost. I mean, and yet he's not assassinated. So I almost wonder if this guy is just some little puppet theater guy that, some actor, or, obviously he's not a threat. It's just this whole world is a stage, in my opinion, when it comes to these media outlets that try and freak people out.
I call him Little Kim myself.
Oh, yeah, Little Kim. There you go.
Here's the funny thing. In this book, Birth, which took me a couple of years to write, but I really, when I go to get this ready for publishing, I really go intense on it, and I work on it all day, every day till it's done. I when I finish several chapters, I take the chapters to a test audience and I read it to them to see if it captures their attention, if I've made any mistakes, if the story line has a contiguous theme through it, because you can't see it sometimes as a writer, but listeners can. And I'm reading this, and in the book I talk about North Korea launching a fake satellite launch that's actually an intercontinental ballistic missile. And I'm reading it, and I'm also listening to it on the news, and I'm going, holy crap, how does all this stuff fit together? It was really surreal to read this in a book that's true with fictional characters, and then it happens.
That's a cool synchronicity. A few years ago, do you remember, I think it was 2011, when that it looked like a giant ICBM flew out of the coast of California, and the Department of Defense came out and said, oh, no, it's not ours. We don't know where it came from.
Yeah, I remember that. It actually went up in the stratosphere and blew up, and that was, I mean, it lit up the whole sky. And I saw something like that when I was a kid. I grew up in California, and Vandenberg had launched something, and I saw this kind of squiggly, smoke trail go up into the sky, and then I saw it explode. And it was a huge, like blue-green kind of, wash that went up in the upper sky. And I stood there for hours and watched it, and I'm just a kid. And I thought to myself, what the heck is going on here? I didn't hear anything, obviously, because it was way up in space, but I don't doubt at all that there's all kinds of projects like this. And I think this happened last year. They did it twice. They launched 2 missiles, and people watched it and said, hey, what's going on? It's, no problem. Don't worry, everyone. We're just running a test.
Swamp gas.
Yeah, and they didn't announce it, and then they did it again. And people were like, what are you guys doing? Oh, it's no problem. We're done now. Everything we wanted to test, we're finished now. Don't worry. Nothing to see here. Move along.
Yeah.
And these were, as I recall, I believe these were sea-based launches. They were launching from a submarine.
And the reason I brought up the one from 2011 is I was wondering if it could possibly have been like a Chinese submarine missile or something, but maybe it was just one of our own and they didn't want to admit it.
Yeah, that's really... I was talking about the TARS system, the Tethered Array Radar system. I got wind that President Obama had ordered it to be dismantled. So I wrote a letter to the contractor that actually built it and put it up there. And they sent me back some stuff that, the state of Florida, the state of Texas, the governor of Texas, Rick Perry, the company itself had written the Obama administration and said, look, you can't take this tethered array radar system down. It gives us over the horizon. Look, these things sit at 15,000 feet. It gives us a view of the Gulf of Mexico that goes out hundreds of miles. We don't have to, rely on surface-based radar, which you can only see about 10 miles. And he ordered it taken apart, and it was dismantled. Now, the interesting thing was, a short while later, we discovered a submarine that was leaving the Gulf of Mexico. And I can't remember, I think it was Russian. But the interesting thing about it was they didn't know how long it had been there. They only saw it as it was leaving.
Was he saying that he wanted it shut down supposedly for financial reasons, or?
He didn't give a reason. He just ordered it dismantled.
Yeah,
and
crazy.
that was what's the strange thing is we lost that over the horizon early warning system that we had across the southern border of Texas and the panhandle of Florida to look over the Gulf of Mexico for low-flying objects.
Yeah, that's crazy. Artificial intelligence right now is really kind of at the brink of taking off. You feel that it does have, is it a danger to us?
Well, we have one advantage over them is we can turn peanut butter into eye tissue.
Peanut butter into eye tissue?
Yeah, sure. I can eat a peanut butter sandwich and basically fortify every cell in my body.
Right. Okay.
I'm mobile. I can go barefooted. I can swim. I can receive energy from a variety of different kinds of foods, and I have no batteries. Artificial intelligence is meaningless if it isn't applied to something. Applied intelligence means something. Now, humans can do something that computers, as far as I know, cannot do, even artificial intelligence cannot do. And that is, the way we remember things is not like a computer bank. We don't have ones and zeros. We don't have a hard drive. We don't have files that we have to go access. We have transitory relationships that we build in our brain, in our soul, that link music and architecture, crystallography and metallurgy and poetry and chemistry. we put these things together and remember them and recall them in different ways every single time. And that's what makes, when the Spirit of God pours out upon the earth, it makes painters, pick up that image and paint something. It makes great engineers like Nikola Tesla design, Tesla coils or ways of gathering energy from another dimension and making it work in this dimension. We can do that. Computers can only do what we give them the capacity to do. I mean, before Tesla, we knew what electricity was. We could see it in the sky. We could, maybe put it in a battery and power something simple. But to this day, and I ask engineers this all the time in my lectures, what is electricity? Oh, they have all the math, and they can tell you what Faraday's are, and they can tell you what the right-hand rule is, and what inductance and capacitance. And yes, I understand all that. But what is electricity? When you give me a copper wire up here on the stage, and I connect a light to it, it's doing nothing until I move a magnet past the copper wire. It's lighting the light. Where are the electrons coming from? I know we're inducing the current flow, but these electrons are now turned into photons of light, which you see with your eyes, and they're done. Where do the other electrons come from? You see, nobody knows the answer to these questions. All we know is how to make electricity work, and we can predict it, and we can measure it, and very, very accurately, but we don't know where it comes from. And there are other forms of energy about which computers are completely unaware that humans are aware of. We can transmit that energy from one person to another, and we can change society. In less than 100 years, we went from walking and riding horses to flying through the sky and orbiting our planet. And we're going to do it again. And I don't think artificial intelligence is going to threaten any of that. I think it's going to facilitate it.
You've talked also about, you think that we're getting close to a really big transition, an earth change. And I was hoping we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the earth change that every ancient civilization looked forward to is where we are right now. The idea is that Earth was put together by a designer, and it is, of course, rocks and metal and all of that, but it's also a higher energy. And, George Noory asked me just the other day, how can there be two planets occupying the same space at the same time? And I said, well, think of it like this. I have a 5-gallon bucket. I filled it full of glass marbles. I can't fit another marble into it. Now I have another 3 gallons of water, and I pour it in the bucket. And the bucket is holding both the water and the marbles. The reason is because there's a lot of space in between the marbles. And the water is a much higher vibrational matter, and it can fill in all that space between the marbles. Well, a lot of people don't know this, but Earth is not very dense. It has a certain density, yes, of course, but a neutrino can actually fly through a solid light year of Earth and never hit a thing. That's how much space there is in the matter that makes up Earth. Look at our human body. We're water and calcium and a few well-placed minerals organized into a molecular machine. But that isn't you. That's not me. I'm this animated being on the inside. I'm this leaping, flying, imagining force that's on the inside of this bag of water, and I make it move. I'm the higher energy. And one day, the higher energy is going to leave this bag of water, and it's going to be nothing. It's going to return to the dust of the earth, but my soul is going to go on. And the idea that every ancient civilization had, and that I try to bring out in the 4-book series of the Arc of Millions of Years, and now in this movie book called Birth, is that higher vibrational Earth is about to leave. Earth is about to go through a transitional change where the higher vibrational Earth and the lower vibrational Earth that are together now, living in harmony, are going to come apart. And the souls that can vibrate with that higher Earth are going to go with it. And the souls that vibrate with the lower vibrational Earth are going to stay here. And that is the grand division that's described in the Bible.
And I really like the way you put that together too. It does make a lot of sense when you bring it up that way. And let me even take that a step further. If you look at physical matter underneath an electron microscope, you'll see those protons and neutrons, etc. But can they even get to a finite point? I mean, is there even an existence of matter? It's almost holographic in nature.
That's right. It's we split that stuff, subatomic particles, apart all the time with a super collider, and we have the menu of frequencies that it takes to put together a hydrogen proton. We accelerate it to 99.99% the speed of light. We get that thing so massive it's sitting at 10 or 12 tera electron volts. That's how massive this proton is, and then we slam them into each other and bust them apart, and we have the menu of frequencies. But for all of that research, we can't gather up those frequencies and make one proton.
What do you think the main purpose of CERN is? Do you feel that it's what the mainstream media discusses it as?
I think the purpose has changed over time. I think it first was put together as an observational device, but as they poured more and more power into it, not only did they realize that just generating the magnetic field does strange things, but creating these massive particles and slamming them together also created a phenomenon that seemed to tap into the dimension from which these frequencies come. And I think an observational device has now become a fascinating toy that, now the new purpose might be to keep accessing that other dimension, not only to see what we can find, but see what we can put in there. And like every weapon, as soon as they figure out that they can do it, they can't stop doing it.
Well, it makes me wonder also if it could be designed to be some type of black hole, creator. Imagine the ultimate weapon. Well, hey, let's create a black hole and suck in 50,000 bad guys and then pop them out on the other side of the universe.
Well, that's possible. It would take a lot of mass to do that. We're talking about, the mass of 80 to 100 protons slamming into each other. It's not very much, even at 10 or even 14 tera electron volts. We're not talking about much. A black hole that you would create, might be enough to draw a few atoms into it, but you got to put a tremendous amount of mass together to create a self-supporting black hole in space. You need something at least 4 times as massive as our sun. And I'm saying that's the minimum threshold. The black holes that we have recently observed out there, and now we've observed coalescing black holes, which is a remarkable discovery for the laser interferometer gravitational wave observatories. I've been to both of them, sat in both control rooms, and they're fascinating instruments. And for decades, they've been looking for a single black hole and been unable to find it. Now they have found a coalescing set of black holes that are coming together, and that's why they can see them, because they're rippling space-time so severely. But I would say each one of these black holes is probably 1,000 to 10,000 suns worth of mass. It's a tremendous amount to create a black hole that can actually have that kind of function. But that doesn't mean that you can't see through a black hole that's 1 proton wide, if just for a millisecond or a billionth of a second.
And there's a lot of speculation out of a winged destroyer called Nibiru Planet X. First it was supposed to be 2003 and then 2012. So whether you're a believer or not, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of evidence that points to the possibility of there being a Planet X that's getting ready to come back around. But at the same time, there's been so much speculation for years that I'm still on the fence. What is your thought?
Well, I of course have thoughts, and then I have research. I think Gil Broussard's about the best authority that I've seen out there that's done the historical study on this this body that might be passing through our solar system. And my last conversation with him, I said, "Okay, give me a drop dead date, Gil. What is the date that we're either going to see this thing and it's going to appear and mildly or severely cause these events to happen?" And he said March of 2016. If it doesn't show up by March of 2016, it's not going to show up. Now, that being said, most of the planets in the universe don't revolve around a star. They're free floating. They just go through space, slingshotting from one gravitational event to another. And it is quite possible that Immanuel Velikovsky was right, that there was such a body that came through our solar system once, caused this great havoc, did look very similar to what was described in the book of Revelation. But it doesn't mean that it's going to come back. And, the story that Zacharias Sitchin told, which was his translation of these Sumerian tablets, it has not been corroborated by any other translator, only him. And now he's passed away, so we really can't ask him questions about it anymore. That's the evidence in one side of the balance. So the good scientist would say, well, let's not throw that evidence out just because it seems a little weird and it doesn't agree with our current paradigm. Let's put it in the balance and let's draw a hypothesis that says there is a planet that's extra to our solar system that we haven't seen in a long time. There's only historical data that's even come through. And now let's try to eliminate that with some experiments. And so far, the jury is still out. That's the best thought that I can put forward about it.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I appreciate that. So what's next for you, Brooks?
Well, that's a really good question. Well, of course, my day job, we're still working heavily every single day to try to launch this electric truck. It's horrendously complex to launch a vehicle platform. I've been in the business almost my whole life. And I can tell you this one's tougher than most because we're not launching a gasoline-powered vehicle. We're launching against a behemoth oil industry, and so it's a little tougher than it would normally be. So that's my day job, and I am beginning to put the notes together for book 2 of this trilogy, this birth trilogy, and hopefully by the time I get through with this book and get it published, we get the first one in film, and that's my next project.
Wonderful. And I'm so glad you brought up the electric truck business that you have right now. I'd like to talk about that for a minute before we close out tonight. I think that's wonderful. The Tesla cars that are out there right now, I think that technology is pretty awesome. 200-mile plus radius on a very cool car that looks good. And, they're working on some other stuff. So I'm glad that they were kind of the pioneers in the industry as far as the electric cars. Now, what your truck is that full electric?
Yeah, it's full electric. And I have great respect for Tesla Motors. I know several of the founders of that company. They're no longer with the company. When Elon Musk did his hostile takeover, he fired all of them. But they have done something that no other electric car company has been able to do, and that is they've beat the odds. They beat the short traders. They beat the naysayers. And I have to hand it to Elon. He's kind of the hero of our industry right now, and he hasn't hurt us. He hasn't hurt us at all. He's been a great help to the industry and showed that an electric car can be practical. People will buy it, and he's changing the paradigm. The truck is a little different spectrum. We're tapping into the commercial end of it, where gasoline-powered trucks just don't do as good a job. They're not cost efficient to operate or maintain. They're inefficient. They're polluting. You're lucky to see a truck get 9 or 10 miles to the gallon. And we just propose a smarter way to move around town and move small amounts of goods with these light pickups.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea. Absolutely. So you're going to have like a lightweight? Are you trying to keep it under 2,000 pounds? Or is there a certain?
Well, right now we're at 3,300 pounds, and that's after a lot of vehicle lightweighting technology. We had to redesign the truck from the ground up as an electric truck. It's, for all intents and purposes, the toughest, safest truck cab ever built in a pickup truck. And it's able to carry 1,000 pounds, 100 miles on basically about $1.50's worth of electricity.
Also, do you have any pictures that you can share with us, or is that still hush-hush?
Oh, no, it's all on the website at ev-fleet.com. We have videos on there, and there are pictures of several of the models of the trucks. We don't do a lot of marketing because we're doing face-to-face, company-by-company marketing. We're not selling to the general public yet. We probably won't for a couple of years. We have enough orders to keep the plant busy for a long, long time. It's just designed to be a light commercial pickup truck.
That really could change the entire industry. That could be a serious thorn in big oil's side. I hope that takes off for you. What kind? Are you going through legal battles? Are there lawyers that are saying you have to have 24 airbags and 15?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's we've been through all the crash testing, all the design work, all the DOT stuff. What we're doing now is what's called the Advanced Airbag Program, and it's a program that has become increasingly fraught with liabilities because of the recent recall with Takata. It didn't just affect Takata. Takata bags are in so many vehicles. They're in Nissans, they're in Teslas, they're in Fords, they're in all kinds of vehicles. So it's a horrendous exposure. But also the other airbag companies that make a better airbag, a safer airbag, the liability went up for them too. So the cost of putting advanced airbags in a vehicle has just almost doubled. In fact, it's more than doubled. And that's part of the reason why we're not in production yet, because we're raising money to finish the Advanced Airbag project, which basically went from just under $4 million to over $8 million.
Well, and Brooks, if there's something that anybody that's listening to this podcast right now could do to help, is there a fund me page or some way that just, someone like myself or someone that's listening could help out?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to the website. There's all kinds of ways to help, not just technology. We're one of the few car companies that has an open portal for new technologies. If you have a new technology for storage or energy generation, we're your path to manufacturing if you have a working prototype. But there's also a donate button and, any kind of connection or networking to sources of funds for American businesses is most appreciated because, you got to face it. One of the reasons we don't have a lot of manufacturing in the United States is because there's no money available for American manufacturing. There's no money to borrow.
Now, you're really good at design and invention type stuff. Oh, I've always wondered if you create a car that, the rooftop is set up with solar panels, that somehow that energy links back to the batteries. And then if you could have some type of windmill set up, obviously not a typical windmill, but something that would create energy from the wind that was produced while the car was driving, whether it be on the wheels or the tail of the vehicle or something like that. So you could harness different types of energies that are free, and it would all be brought into a battery. Have you guys looked into stuff like that?
Well, you've probably been to our website already.
Oh, no, I haven't. No.
Well, these are natural iterations, and of course, we've experimented with all of this stuff. We've been in the business a long, long time. Some of it you do get a benefit from. We do have integral solar panels in the vehicle, and they will charge themselves up by sunshine. Some of the others that you mentioned, we've experimented with, and some of it's practical and some of it's not.
Cool. Well, hey, Brooks, it's been just a real honor to have you on the show here with us tonight. I thank you so much for spending time out of your busy schedule here. And for those that have had the opportunity to listen to this show, please check out Brooks' website at x2-radio.com. Also, Brooks, just tell us real quick your other locations to find out more about your work and your books, please.
Well, you can get the books at Amazon. That's the best place to get them. And the offer still stands. If you buy the book at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, wherever you buy it, just email me your receipt. The link is in the book, and I will send you the audio version for free. I want you to enjoy the book, so if you're not a great reader, don't worry about it. I read it for you. If you want to listen to it while you're driving, it's a great ride.
Right on. Also, ev-fleet.com. It's been great. Hopefully we'll have the opportunity to speak with you again sometime.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us tonight here at the Leak Project. We have special guest, Dr. Brooks Agnew. Dr. Agnew is a researcher, lecturer, inventor, scientist, author, adventurist, and math guru, graduating in the top 0.1% of his class at Tennessee Technological University in chemistry and mathematics. Dr. Agnew has a PhD in physics and is contracted for hundreds of Fortune 100 companies. His projects and more than 1,000 technical publications earned him U.S. patents and the rank of Six Sigma Black Belt, with more than 500 million recovered or earned from his process improvements. Also, Dr. Agnew first became an author back when he was only 13 and has created a 3-part series called The Arc of Millions that has remained in the top 1% at Amazon as well as Barnes & Noble. Radio host of X Squared, Dr. Agnew speaks with guests each week live between 5 and 8 p.m. Pacific time. Hey, Dr. Agnew, this is just great to have you on the show tonight. Is it okay if I call you Brooks?
Oh, that's even better. I like that.
Perfect. So how the heck you doing?
Well, you ever see a one-legged cat in a litter box?
Not yet.
Yeah, it's pretty busy and just trying to keep it covered up and keep everything going. It's an exciting time to be alive on the earth.
Oh, it certainly is. I mean, technology, every single day something new is coming out. It's like Christmas every other day for, tech gurus. It's amazing. Nanotechnologies and biotechnologies and just rewriting of history and everything else that's going on. But, I know back in 2006, you were basically the lead guy for an expedition into the inner Earth. And how did that go? I don't know if I've had an opportunity to hear much about that.
Well, we, of course, traveled the world, went to Tibet and China and Japan and Mexico and Canada. And let's see, where else did we go? We went to the UK, all over the UK, chasing this legend about the possibility of, Earth being formed as a hollow sphere. And there was a lot of science coming out all along the way, different studies done on USGS seismograms, observations from space, oceanographic observations, which just seemed to bring into question current planetary core geology, and it just really excited us. And of course, we wanted to do an expedition by sea, by ocean voyage to this region of the Arctic, but there was only about a 2-year window that this was going to be open, because then it was going to refreeze. It was just a really freak opening that occurred in 2007. So we hurried as fast as we could and tried to raise the money. We were not successful in doing that. And so we never did make the Arctic voyage. Now we're talking with LTA, lighter than air cameras, a company that has been feeding high schools and colleges all over the country with their gear to launch balloons, up into actually about 100,000 feet and take pictures and take samples of the air and radiation and, send experiments up. And they're the ones been supplying all the hardware. So I contacted them, and we are putting together a multi-craft expedition without people. We're going to send just the cameras floating over this area. And the challenge is to not do it at 100,000 feet, but do it from about 4,000 feet or 5,000 feet. So we want to be able to put altitude controls on these balloons. And so these guys are the experts at it. They think they can get a balloon to go up just to a certain altitude or barometric pressure, stay there, and then travel with the winds across that area that we were going to sail by ship. And then we'll collect the balloons over on the leeward side of the project, and then download all the information from the cameras and see what we can see. So we're going to try that this summer.
That would make sense as financially also. I'm sure it's a lot more affordable to do that versus
yeah.
And it makes me wonder too, being the past few years have been some of the hottest years on record. I think I read a headline, I didn't read the article, but it said last year was the hottest year on record worldwide. So I need to get into that some more. And I'm wondering if that opening that was available for just a short time back in 2007, if now it's possibly gotten even bigger and it's there right now.
Well, actually, all that data that shows that the planet's hotter than it's ever been is all false data.
Really?
Yeah. Even the NOAA article that's being quoted by Congress by saying, 2014 was the hottest year on record, and they hold up the NOAA study. That's actually a misquote of the study. The study headline actually said there's a 38% chance that 2014 was the hottest year on record. It wasn't, obviously. What we look for when you do what's called scatter plotting and you try to make a prediction based on past data, is you look for a line fit. You look to see if your data fits along a regression line that you draw through the data. And what we really look for is data that fits at least 99%, like 99.2 or 99.5. That's pretty good data. We start getting down in the 96, 94, 85. It starts to look more like a cloud with a line drawn through it. It's not really indicative of a trend. But when you get into 38%, this is in the realm of the ridiculous. So they reported the information correctly, but it was headlined incorrectly. The truth is, if you look up the Arctic Ice website yourself, you can see it. We're actually back to 1981 levels of ice, what we call red ice. Red ice is ice that lasts through the summer and then is snowed on again by the winter snows. And we're back to 1981 levels. So the ice is now only about 50,000 square miles from where it was originally in the 1700s. And it's just way out on the outer edges of it. So This area that we wanted to sail is now probably 3 meters thick in ice, and it probably won't open up for ever again. It only opened up once in 100,000 years, which was in 2007. And that wasn't really a warm year. What happened was this polar vortex that we're experiencing the last few years in North America was blowing in a different direction in 2007. It was blowing almost diagonally due east across the bottom of the ice shelf. And it created a very powerful and broad wind shear across the ice shelf. And it caused it to calf or calve. It's like having a calf, like a cow has a calf. That's what we call it with glaciers. And it broke off, and it was about half the size of the state of Connecticut. And that's what opened up this Northwest Passage and made it navigable. But since then, it has completely refrozen over, and you can't get close to it even in the summertime, not even with an icebreaker.
Wow. Okay. So that's very interesting. And, it wouldn't surprise me, because if the powers that be or if the mainstream media tells you one thing on the news, I usually think it's the exact opposite. That's just kind of how they, well, it's good for you. Well, it's really not. So, but
it can be, but it's almost always that way, especially when there's a lot of money tied up in it.
Sure.
And what the powers that be, or so you call them, they're actually trying to craft a global tax on carbon. So we're talking about trillions of dollars of taxes pulled from developed countries that they can redistribute to developing countries. And this is the basis of this tax, is this myth called man-made climate change. Now, climate change does happen, but mankind has nothing to do with it.
Well, let me jump in here then. As far as the way the weather has been here in Texas this year, last year, and other places in the U.S. at least, I don't know worldwide, but I've had the opportunity to travel the country quite extensively since 2013, and it does seem like at least the sun is a lot more intense. Like even if the temperature is the same, it seems like the heat on your skin, it just feels more intense. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, and I do feel it too. And there are a lot of reasons why that happens. One is, of course, the wavelengths that the sun is putting out, but the other are the wavelengths that make it through our atmosphere and reach the surface. And, one of the things that has been occurring since the president and other organizations around the world have declared war on climate change, when they declare war on something, they like to develop weapons against it, and once they develop the weapon, they got to try it.
Right.
So they've been doing what appears to be spraying, high altitude spraying. You call it chemtrails.
Glad you brought this up.
And the spraying, it does two things. First of all, it blocks the infrared, which is a longer wavelength radiation that can strike the oceans, for instance, and warm them up. And so the theory is that if you block the infrared, you will begin cooling the planet. And this was, a grand experiment that was done without our permission. And they can't deny it. I mean, there's too much proof now that it does happen. But the other thing that happens is the ultraviolet frequencies, the shorter wavelength frequencies, are intensified. And it has a more devastating effect to the biosphere than the infrared does, in that it dimerizes long chain molecules, especially DNA. Dimerization, consider it like a double-bladed axe. It comes in and splits free radicals in molecules and breaks them apart. And when it does, it causes mutation. Now, it doesn't so much affect the larger life forms, but it does affect smaller life forms like bacteria. And as you know, all of the life forms on Earth ultimately live off of bacteria. So when you begin sterilizing the bacteria that protect the surface and that create the prime food chain for plankton, and then, of course, whales, and then all the fish, and then the fish that eat the fish, all that accumulates, those mutations begin to pass through the biology, the physiology of the planet, and it can have devastating effects. And we're seeing it. We're seeing mammals that come to the surface for air and reside in mostly shallow water most of the time, wash ashore with these terrible sunburns that they've never had before, and in large groups. And it is, I believe, is a direct result of this intensifying of the shorter wavelengths of light that are making their way through our atmosphere.
Another thing I'd like to ask you, and I've talked to other people about this before, I have a radiation detector built into my watch that keeps track of basically the UHV ratings, the microsieverts per hour. And I've noticed the past 3 years, they've almost doubled here in San Antonio on a regular basis. And I'm wondering if that might, like the chemtrail spraying, or what do you think is causing that? And I don't think it's Fukushima, because it would have happened sooner, I think.
Well, you probably wouldn't be seeing it in Texas if it was Fukushima for sure. But the key question here, when you're talking about radiation, is the species of the radiation. What is it that's causing the radiation? If you're just looking at scintillations, that can be a little bit deceiving. Now, I have a gamma and alpha spectrometer, so I can tell what it is that's making the radiation. So I went to the coast of California last year, and I did a survey from San Francisco all the way up to the Oregon border, on the coast, right on the water. And I was taking samples of the air as close as I could get to the water to see if I was getting cesium or plutonium or thorium or sodium-40 or something, and I was not. So whatever radiation increases that you're seeing are probably not those species. It's probably longer wavelength radiation in the X-ray or in the gamma ray range, but it's not radiation from a decay here on this planet.
Well, that's actually a good thing then, if you're not finding plutonium out by California.
Yeah, because it's about the most poisonous thing on the earth. Plutonium and polonium are deadly in even small amounts because they're alpha emitters. Once you receive an alpha particle in your body, it's only a matter of time, and not very long, sometimes a matter of hours or days, that particle is going to decay. And when it does, it's an alpha decay, and it's like a sledgehammer on biological tissue.
And another thing too, with all the chemtrails that are going on, do you think that might have something to do with blocking out like satellite pictures from, Russia or something like that?
Sure, it could. Satellites typically can view in several different wavelengths depending on the kind of instruments that are on it. They can look at X-ray or infrared or visible light, and it certainly would block out the visible, and it probably would mask the infrared signatures as well. Infrared signatures are really important, especially with national defense, because you can tell, for instance, if an airplane was sitting on a tarmac the day before and then they moved it, you could see the infrared signature of that plane on the tarmac because of the temperature difference. So the plane doesn't actually have to be there. They can know the satellite's coming over and they can move the plane, but you can still see the shadow of the plane. So it's really important in national defense.
Okay. And if we could jump back to that expedition in 2006 where you had the opportunity to travel different locations on the globe here, did you guys hit hotspots that were popular in conspiracy realms where underground tunnels supposedly are that are connected to military DUMS type bases? Or
we did. We were traveling. We did the upper plateau of Tibet for 2 weeks, and this is really unforgiving territory. We did it. If you do the upper plateau, they call them